Hi, everybody. We're going to just wait for a few more people to show up, and we're going to get rocking shortly. Christine, what's the weather like in Florida? So we got Boston, Florida, Chicago, Canary Island, Iowa.
Australia.
Wow. Vancouver. Hey, Graham. Santa Fe and New York. Dylan, where in New York are you from? Westchester. I grew up in Staten Island, not too far from there.
I'm right from Rockland County, right over the river from them.
It's a small world. We're going to get started very shortly. DC in the house. How many other people have not yet identified themselves? Everybody check in. Let's see where everybody's coming from. Tonight or this morning or this afternoon. Italy, wow. Colombia, Canada. You guys know that there are over 200 countries represented in this course. We're actually close to 50,000 enrolled students as well. So with that said, I want to wish everybody a good evening, a good morning, a good afternoon, wherever you're coming from. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on our first live show for CYBER501x, Cybersecurity Fundamentals. You guys know who I am? Who am I? Chris, this question's not open for you. I am. Spelling does not count tonight. So let me officially say that, hi, I'm Jonathan S. Weissman, and tonight our forum moderator, Chris, is with us.
Hello.
You guys know Chris from the forums? When I just said I'm Jonathan Weissman, what did I do from a cybersecurity perspective? What's that called? Ooh, Robert's got my name in colors, the RIT colors as well. Very nice. Saying I'm Jonathan Weissman is what? What is that called? Who's watching the videos? Identified. Carlos, first in there. Correct. Oh, here come the answers. Absolutely. We'll give you all full credit. Your grades, this is an ungraded question. Okay, this is an ungraded question. We can't up your average. Okay, big deal. I said I'm Jonathan Weissman. What do I have to do next? What's next? You going to take my word for it? Don't take my word at face value. Don't take anything at face value in the world of cybersecurity. I've got to authenticate. That is absolutely correct. First in there on the buzzer, Christine. How many different ways can I prove that I'm Jonathan Weissman? How many different ways do I have of proving it? Yeah, Robert, you're right. I'm going to give out some more information. My name is not enough. Two-factor authentication, we'll get there. Just give me the categories first, please. We'll get there. Very good. You guys have been watching the videos and answering correctly. I could tell you something in the form of a password, but since you guys do not have any means of a shared message, I can't really authenticate with something that I know tonight. Maybe something that I have. Do you guys see something on me that's appeared in the videos? The asynchronous videos we've recorded? You guys see something on my person? This is a badge that RIT gave me. This is something that I have. Yeah, granted, it's not an RSA key fob, but it's the same badge that appeared in the video, so that's at least, yeah, you got it, name tag the badge. That's one-factor authentication. We already ruled out something I know, so that just leaves us with something I am, biometrics. So Wilson, you said my face, right? Does my face look the same as it's looked in the videos? Oh, very good, Ken. That's exactly where I was going. Because if you guys were not humans and you were biometric scanners, what might you say when I said, oh yeah, look at my face? You might say, hey, that doesn't look like the guy in the video. Looks like his older brother. He's got some facial hair in his face right now. What is it called when I try to authenticate with biometrics and the system says, sorry? What's that called? Haircut is different as well, very sharp. I'm not the same person, Carlos says. False, negative. Absolutely correct. System is saying, no, 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 that's not Jonathan S. Weissman. And that's, as we've discussed, a very big problem with the something you are authentication mechanism. But Chris over here is a student of mine, currently in a malware reverse engineering course. We'll talk about that a little bit later. It came up in one of the questions. So let me ask Chris, who sat in my class at 8 a.m. this morning. Chris, Am I your professor?
Yes, you are.
Will you guys accept that form of authentication? Chris being the trusted third party? If Chris is the trusted third party, although we're stretching this a little bit. Oh, they're not trusting you, Chris. If Chris is the trusted third party, though, what would we call him from this week's lesson? You don't know Chris? Absolutely. He's not a CA. You know why? Because he could have one of those fake digital certificates that Symantec has been issuing. So now we have to authenticate Chris. But since this is only a 1-hour program, I'm going to authenticate Chris, and Chris is going to authenticate me. And I'm going to get right to some of the questions that have come into the discussion forum already. Thank you so much for your submissions. And I want to tell you that I'm going to try my best to get through all of the questions tonight. If there are any live questions that come in, I'll get to them afterwards. Any questions that we do not have time for tonight or this morning or this afternoon, I will be posting answers to in the forum, so everybody's going to walk home with an answer. Some of you will get it in a live synchronous audio feed and video. Some will get it in a asynchronous text feed. So yesterday, or actually more than one day ago, Marcio Moto 222. Marcia, are you in the house tonight? You tell me if she's going to.
Will do.
Identify and authenticate herself. She wrote, "Hello, Jonathan. I'd like to know how is the cybersecurity job market in the USA, and how many chances do we have to build a career after finishing this MicroMasters program and continue at RIT? Thanks in advance. Is the MicroMasters program enough?" The reason, by the way, we asked you for those questions in advance is because I found related questions. I'm going to group Steve 1776's question as well in my response. Steve asked me, is earning a certified MicroMasters cybersecurity certificate enough education to start a career? Do tech companies require potential employees to have a master's or bachelor's degree? And then Mary Jane added in a comment, and have you seen people succeed in cybersecurity careers with non-IT backgrounds, for example, science or business? So let me address all three of your great questions in the following way. I'm sure you've seen all of these studies that have been issued based on the lack of personnel for filling current cybersecurity jobs. Right now, estimates have the dearth at about 1 million cybersecurity jobs unfilled worldwide, with most of them, around 350,000, being in the United States of America. Some studies are saying that by 2019, this gap in unfilled jobs is expected to rise to 1.5 or 2 million jobs. I've actually seen a study that was completely off the charts and said there will be 6 million unfilled jobs in 2020. So depending on which study you choose to put more credence in, it doesn't matter. The point is there are tons and tons and tons of jobs out there. The problem right now is that there are corporations that need people immediately to fill cybersecurity jobs, but they don't have the funds to hire all of the personnel that they need because cybersecurity jobs are very specific. And you could specialize in X, Y, Z, or a lot of other different things. So what these recruiters, what these companies are doing is they're putting out ads with a whole bunch of disparate skills that most candidates, quite frankly, don't possess the entirety of all those skills. And because of that, they're not filling the positions that they need. They're trying to fill 3 jobs or 5 jobs with 1 employee, and the skill sets need to be expert level all the way across the board. So one big recommendation I have is take those entry-level jobs that are out there, latch on with a company, network, get your name known, show them your work ethic, show them your fundamental knowledge, and that will springboard you into much higher level, more exciting jobs because you're already in the company. They need somebody in a more prolific position, and you're already there to fill it. They know what you're capable of. So number one, entry-level jobs I think are a wonderful thing. A lot of my RIT students, before they graduate, they actually have big jobs and big salaries from big companies. That's a job in place before they graduate. During career fair here at RIT, there are major companies from Silicon Valley that heavily recruit our students. Our students are not only students, they do work in industry part-time as well. All of our classes are heavily lab-based, but before the lab portion of the classes start, the students get a very deep understanding of the fundamentals. Because you can't attempt any hands-on activity without gaining the fundamental knowledge first, pointing, clicking, and selecting. Without understanding the ramifications of what you're doing, makes you essentially a script kiddie. But if you're a script kiddie and you don't know the ramifications in a cybersecurity position, think about what your job entails, what you're protecting, what you're securing, what you're looking to keep as an asset. The risks, the vulnerabilities, the exploits, they're out there. Now, the reason why we don't have required labs in this particular course is that, as I mentioned earlier, there are 50,000 enrolled students, and we don't really have the infrastructure or bandwidth to account for this really, really large number. However, starting with next week's unit, we're going to start off a phenomenal look at networking next week. With our debut of networking next week, I'm going to be giving you guys optional but highly recommended hands-on exercises to perform on your machines to run in conjunction with the knowledge and the fundamentals that we've acquired thus far. And we are going to be continuing in that fashion in week 2 of networking. And then when we go over to sysadmin. So I highly recommend that you follow through with those optional ungraded instructions. Some of you were asking about our capstone course as well. Well, our capstone course is going to be filtered. There's going to be a set number of students that are approved and allowed to take that class. We're going to be working with different cohort institutions for the actual lab facilities. So when you get through the first few introductory courses and you acquire a phenomenal skill set of fundamentals and basic hands-on capabilities, that's where you take it to the next level with your lab-based activities. In fact, my students often come to me and they tell me the actual interview questions that the recruiters were asking them. The recruiters don't ask them to set up a network, to configure a network, to maintain a network, to troubleshoot a network, to hack into a network. You know what my students tell me? My students tell me that the recruiters point blank ask them about the fundamentals, how networks work, how the protocols work. One of the most famous interview questions that all of my students really across the board get from recruiters, from the major companies in Silicon Valley who come here to RIT a couple of times every year is, okay, you open up a browser and you go to google.com. Tell me everything that happens from when you put your fingers on the keyboard to when you see google.com on your screen. And you know what that answer entails? That answer entails a lot of protocols like ARP. It entails protocols like DNS. It entails routing knowledge. It entails switching knowledge. It entails infrastructure knowledge. It entails a lot of things that you need to be solid in And you know what? In this 8-week course, out of all the interview questions that my students have told me they've received, you are going to be able to answer a vast majority of those questions. Follow through with the fundamentals. Do the optional but recommended hands-on exercises, and I look forward to seeing you in the capstone course where we get real lab scenarios to emulate what you would see in that proverbial real world. And then, of course, you know that's not the end of our relationship. Hopefully you'll join RIT Online for either a certificate or an online master's degree. I'll post links to our sites related to how you can make that transition. But my point is, it only starts with the fundamentals. In fact, last month, when we had Career Fair, another former student of mine, a recruiter for Cisco Meraki, actually came to my office, said, "Hey, Jonathan, let's have some coffee and catch up on old times," and we did. We had a cup of coffee, this Cisco Meraki recruiter, former student of mine, and he told me, I didn't even give him any prompts. He said, "Jonathan, you know what I'm looking for? I am looking for students who know their fundamentals very solidly." And I said, you know what? I'm going to tell that to my edX class. Just take a quick peek at some messages that might be coming or going. Okay, Chris actually is doing a great job of feeding me some questions that may be coming through the chat, and I'll tell Chris and I'll tell the person who prompted Chris to prompt me. That answer's coming up. I'm still not finished my first answer. Holy cow, it's 7:22 here on the East Coast, and I still didn't finish my first answer, so let me get to my conclusion of the first answer. You guys are aware that the next course in this MicroMaster sequence is a forensics course, and the third course is my return to your laptops, living rooms, when I teach you about network security. In my upcoming network security class, I'm going to be doing lots of hands-on demos that you can emulate. Again, we can't require you to do this, but it's going to be optional but highly recommended. We're going to do things like port scanning, firewall configuration, intrusion detection systems, intrusion prevention systems, malware detection. We'll be using Kali Linux and Metasploit to pen test and exploit vulnerabilities. Oh, by the way, side note, I'm sure you guys know that exploit can be both a noun and a verb. We'll exploit vulnerabilities on systems and networks. We'll be packet sniffing with Wireshark. How can we do any of that if you don't know about MAC addresses, if you don't know about IP addresses, if you don't know about ports, if you don't know about the different sets and configurations of firewalls and IDSs, IPSs, about malware? How are you going to do all that stuff in my network security class? And the answer is, sit tight and enjoy the next few weeks as we continue this amazing cybersecurity fundamentals course. I've actually had a bunch of working professionals already in the first 2+ weeks of this course tell me that they've been in industry, and this course that they're taking right now is helping to fill in the blanks in their knowledge. And now they understand why they were told to do things certain ways. And now they understand why protocols work the way they do, and concepts are why they are. So don't be a script kiddie. Be an expert. That means walking before you run. Now, to address the question that Chris is filling me in on, and this was part of my original answer anyway, if you don't have a background in cybersecurity, if you don't have a background in IT, you know what I'm going to tell you? Who cares? There are 1 million jobs out there right now. If you show the knowledge of the fundamentals, you're able to be trained. That Cisco Meraki recruiter said, "Jonathan, show me a student that knows the fundamentals and I'll train him. I'll personally give them the hands-on training they need." But you have to have a passion, number one. You have to have the fundamental knowledge, number two. And you have to be ready for what is going to be the most exciting ride of your life. It's, of course, I'm biased, but it doesn't make it false. It's the most exciting job. Everything is different on a daily basis, and it keeps you on your toes specifically. In fact, not only don't you need an IT background, not only don't you need some form of security background to take this course, to master this course, to master the program, to get your online degree, to get a job in that proverbial real world. You know who governments are hiring? You know who companies are hiring nowadays? Hackers that have been to jail, the black hat hackers that have done bad things to many people, to many organizations. If those people are now reformed and are forgiven, you guys have no black hat or maliciousness inside of you. So you guys are more than in the right place at the right time. Now, some people, and this is my first answer over here, but it's a few questions at once. What good is this MicroMasters certification? What is it? What industry weight does it hold? Is it like CompTIA? Is it like other organizations like the ISC Squared organization? Is it like EC Council? Is it like Cisco? Is it like Microsoft? And the best answer that I can give you right now is, I have no idea. This program is in its infancy. You guys are pioneers. When this MicroMasters program takes off and everybody around the world is talking about it, you could say, hey, I had that Weissman guy in that first cybersecurity fundamentals course that was ever on edX. It launched my career. I want to hear back from every single one of you in 20 years, and I want you to tell me how much fun you've had in your careers. I want you to tell me how much money you've made in your careers, and I want you to tell me how much you've enjoyed both learning and actually executing what you've learned. Any other?
Somebody actually wants to know, what are your time management skills?
Okay, so that's a very interesting question, because as Chris can tell you firsthand, teaching is my 100% absolute passion. And in a given semester, I'm actually teaching about 13 different classes. I tell my students that some people get addicted to drugs, some people get addicted to drinking, some people have other bad addictions. My addiction, it's teaching. I love teaching. I also do consulting on the side, and I do that for a few reasons, actually. Number one, I'm not going to deny it, I love it. Teaching is my absolute passion, but I still love taking what I teach and implementing it in a real-world scenario. But there's more. Why else do I consult on the side in addition to teaching the gazillion different classes that I teach each semester? Well, it's phenomenal because I bring stories for my students into the classroom. And I say, hey, this funny thing happened at this company the other day, and it relates to something we talked about just last week. The third reason why I do industry consulting is it's one of the ways that I stay current. And that's something I'm sure you've picked up on. If you read my LinkedIn articles, if you follow up on articles on your own, if you're constantly refreshing your skills, you know that the learning cycle, especially in cybersecurity, never ends. You ever try to download something from a web page or try to open up an application and then that circle is just going around endlessly without stopping? You say, hey, when is this stupid thing going to load already? Well, that's your cybersecurity education. It never ends. Another way I stay current, besides the consulting, of course, the gazillion LinkedIn articles that I read and post on a daily basis. If you're not following me or connected with me, go ahead. Send me a request right now. I'll get to it at the first moment right after the chat concludes. Another way that I stay current is through industry-level certifications. And at this moment in time, I am the proud owner, the proud recipient of 34 high-level industry certifications. And I am never not studying for a certification exam. In other words, the very first thing I do when I get a certification is I pick my next certification, because the learning process never ends. And that's something that I want to impart to you guys as well. You take this course, you take the next course, you keep going. Well, you know what? There is no end in sight. You're always learning. You're always refreshing. Because the moment you stand still, you become stale. You become obsolete. You become undesirable. And you know what? With all of the people that are going to be pushing, hopefully, from a world perspective, for all those cybersecurity jobs, you're going to be left out in the cold. You've got to stay current with industry. You've got to stay current with all of the news stories that are happening in the field of cybersecurity. And for those of you that are wondering if you need a degree, if the MicroMasters is enough, you know what? I'm going to tell you, show a strong knowledge of the fundamentals, and that itself can open up a lot of doors. Would a bachelor's degree help? Yes. Would a master's degree help? Yes. Will the MicroMasters program help? Yes. But it all starts with your knowledge, because you're not being hired on a piece of paper. You're hired on your knowledge. And to that effect, the certifications, while they are on paper, the ones that make more dents and impressions are the ones that have hands-on components, because it's not just answering questions, it's the ability to take what you learned, take the fundamentals that you learned, and apply them in real-world lab simulations or actual scenarios. You can't do those labs, you can't do those scenarios unless you have the fundamental knowledge. So the degree by itself that you might think you might need to get a good job in the field of cybersecurity, that's not the important thing. The important thing is the knowledge. The important thing is the desire. The important thing is the passion. Okay? If you're one of the 3 people who I quoted questions from, and you're in the chat room, let Chris know if that answer is lacking anything. I think that was a very conclusive answer. I hope it was, at least, because I'm about to move on to another question that came in. This one came in from Ranjith, AP. Ranjith, are you in the house right now? Chris, let me know.
Yes, he is.
Ranjith in the house. How you doing? Where are you coming from tonight, Ranjith? Where's my chat screen here? I know we're on a little delay as well.
Mary Jane says that was very helpful, and thank you.
My pleasure, Mary Jane. Where are you from tonight, Mary Jane? Where are you coming from? Chris will let me know. So Ranjith asked, "Hi, Jonathan. My question is about programming or scripting skills in cybersecurity stream. How much of this skill is required for anyone who wants to start or shift his career into the cybersecurity world? And then Core Power." Is Core Power in the house tonight? Core Power? Core Power added, "Do we need specific skills in ASM, assembly language?" Chris is laughing because he's taking a class with me that deals with that this semester, but let me give you a more thorough answer. My personal opinion is yes. Programming or scripting, very important, especially if you specialize in the pen testing specialization, finding and exploiting vulnerabilities in companies, in networks and systems. Because, again, you don't want to be labeled a script kiddie. You don't want to rely on the actual tools. In some cases, you might not even have the tools at your disposal. You might get into a particular box. You might hack into a particular box. You might own the box. And you might need to pivot to move laterally from that box on the network to another box on the network. But if the tools that you've relied on aren't there, what do? Well, you write a script. And the overwhelming language of choice, I'm sure most of you know, is the Python language, which can be both a programming and a scripting language. Other important languages that I would recommend looking into: PHP, a server-side scripting language, to find and exploit vulnerabilities with web servers. That's one of the biggest vectors of attacks nowadays. There is Linux bash shell programming, writing scripts that execute natively in the shell itself. There's Perl. There are other languages as well. Those are the big ones. It also, part of my answer, I will say, it also depends on how you choose to specialize in cybersecurity. Because if you choose a specialization that requires router configuration, that requires firewall configuration, to be honest, the programming is not going to be there as much. But what happens when your boss says, look, I'll give you a pay raise, I'll put you in a much better position if you could do this now for me as well, or this now for me instead. And the new idea the boss has for you requires programming. It's best to make yourself as marketable and as widely varied as possible. And I'm not talking about a little bit of everything. I'm talking about a lot of everything. I want you guys to be masters and experts in many different disciplines and sub-disciplines of cybersecurity. And programming and scripting, most definitely a very, very important component. So let me just ask Ranjit, was that okay? You satisfied with that answer? You need a little bit more before I address Core Power's follow-up to that question.
Also, he's from Houston, Texas.
Houston. So you are 1 hour behind us. Did you have dinner yet tonight? I'm starving. Right after this chat, I'm going to have some dinner. So part 2, Core Power's question, do we need specific skills in ASM, assembly language? So let me tell you a little bit about the class that this guy is taking with me at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time here on the campus of Rochester Institute of Technology. In this class, we take a binary, malware, a program that's been compiled that's meant to do really bad things to your system, and we're going to go hardcore into malware, I believe, in week 7 of this course. We have a binary specimen, and what we do is we figure out exactly what it does, who it communicates with, what methods it uses, whether it stays persistent or not, and other very important characteristics of this binary malware specimen. In fact, you can make a job out of it. You can take your career into a subspecialty known as malware analysis or malware reverse engineering, figuring out what malware does so you can tell antivirus companies and other companies that are out there to put out protection, you can tell them what to look out for, how to flag the malware. Those of you that watched the hashing videos this week, that's a first step to categorizing the malware. But as I've taught Chris this semester, Chris, what did I teach you about static analysis in terms of taking a hash of a malware specimen?
Well, sometimes malware does mutate and it changes, so those hashes may not always be the greatest comparison.
There's a reason why I selected him to be the moderator for this course, guys. He speaks the truth. Malware is constantly mutating and evolving to evade detection. One method of detection is a hash. So in the malware reverse engineering class, I teach the students, well, okay, that's only step 1. Now let's turn that binary specimen into assembly language. Let's see those actual calls that are being made to the CPU, the central processing unit. Let's use both a disassembler to do that. We use the IDA Pro disassembler. And let's also use a debugger. And the one we use is, like IDA, the industry-approved program. What debugger do we use, Chris?
OllyDebug.
OllyDebug, written by a guy named, get this, Ollie. True story. And what we do is we run the malware step by step. We pause it, like you would pause a YouTube video. If you're watching one of my videos and you say, oh, I'm starving. This Weissman guy is rambling. I'm going to just pause him and get a bite to eat. Well, we pause the malware just like you might pause me. And we pause the malware and we look at what's being stored on the CPU registers, what's being stored in RAM, what calls are about to be made, what fully qualified domain name or IP address is about to be contacted. So yes, assembly language, a very, very major component of cybersecurity. So if Core Power is in the house, is Core Power in the house tonight?
He has not identified himself.
Okay.
He has.
If you're watching this asynchronously after Core Power, let me know if that answer satisfies you. Next question comes to us from Gamillan219. Is Gamillan with us tonight, this morning, yesterday, last afternoon? Insert your time of day right over here. Gamillan writes, "Hi, Jonathan. One of the main things I run into at work is trying to educate employees about why they need to change their passwords frequently. We have some users in our company who refuse to do so and are creating security risks. I've had the mind to show them what can happen whenever you don't when you don't change your passwords. I know we haven't discussed Kali Linux yet, and we will do that a lot in the network security class starting in September, but would love to hear what you have to say about cracking passwords with programs like Hashcat. I'll talk about that in a second because there's a follow-up to that question from Kristen1. Kristen, please identify yourself if you're here with us. Just like to know if I'm talking live to you guys. Kristen writes, I've heard much talk recently from some who claim that requiring frequent password changes or long, complicated, difficult to remember combination of letters, numbers, symbols, etc. is actually making applications, and she emphasizes this, less secure because of the difficulties that encourage people to store the passwords outside their personal memory or encourage people to reset their passwords more often, which can be another vector of compromise. Thoughts? So let me get to Gamillan first, and then I'll get to Kristen. Well, Gamillan, in the network security course, I'm going to teach you 3 specific attacks on passwords. The first is the least likely to be used by attackers. It's called a brute force account, where the attacker has access to the login prompt and is able to pass an ID and password to the authenticating system, and he tries it, and he's wrong. So he tries another one, and he's wrong. And this, by the way, might sound familiar to the hack that I described in Unit 1 related to the Houston Astros and the St. Louis Cardinals. Well, what happens is if you brute force, if you try to log into a system with a certain number of incorrect attempts, well, the system will get the user locked out. And, well, if you're doing a denial of service attack, that might be what you're looking to do. But in most cases, that brute force attack is probably not the best method to use as an attacker or even a pen tester. The other viable options, which I'm going to teach you how to do in the network security class, include, number 1, dictionary attacks, which take known passwords, make a file out of them, hash those passwords, and compare those password hashes with databases of hashes of passwords that you, the attacker, have stolen or have compromised. Once you see a match between the hashes, it's a single column index lookup, now you know what the actual password is. And I'm going to teach you probably my favorite dictionary file. It comes with Kali Linux. Chris, what's that one called?
Oh.
It's the name of a famous Queen song.
All I can think of is Rainbow Tables.
Anybody know that song?
We Are the Champions.
The one that comes right before that.
We Will Rock You?
RockYou.txt is the world's most conclusive dictionary-based file because if you open up that file and you scroll down, it's going to take a really long time to scroll down. They've come up with all possible words with permutations and combinations, and know that $ for the S doesn't make you more secure. The O substituted with a 0 doesn't make you more secure. They've got all different combinations that come after common words, and that is one method of an attack on passwords. I'll teach you another one called a rainbow table attack that Chris was talking about. I'll teach you about one of my favorite utilities called offcrack, which is where a rainbow table, you know, of course, hashes, if you've watched my videos, hashes are one-way functions. You can't take that smoothie and get the banana back. You can't take that cooked burger and get the raw meat back. You can't take the hash and turn it into the password that it was generated from. But I'm going to teach you how to use a rainbow table, which is a way to find out a collision, which is a weakness in a hashing algorithm that has multiple inputs produce the same output hash. And rainbow tables, after I teach you how to use and make them, will be defeated by the good guys, by us the good guys, with something called, speaking of burgers, something you might put on your burger, salt as well. I'll also teach you about other utilities that I use in a lot of my classes, THC Hydra, Cain and Abel. Some of these might seem familiar to you, but you know what? I can't teach you any of that stuff until you master my fundamentals. Chris, what's coming in on the chat right now? Anything pressing? I saw you sent me a message here.
Yes, there's a few messages, but those can come back to for later on. But
okay.
Kind of going along with what you were talking about with systems, somebody who wants to know if you have a recommendation or advise on a dedicated number of GPUs or graphic cards to make exercises faster for security courses to save time.
Okay, so my best answer right now is it doesn't matter, because if you're doing true pen testing, if you're trying to emulate the scenario as best possible, the attackers aren't necessarily coming in with physics processing units, graphics processing units, and other hardcore systems. You want to actually emulate the most commonly found systems and not try to come up with some souped up system to give you some false positive, so to speak, in terms of the situation, in terms of speed, efficiency. In fact, I saw somebody posted, not in the live chat forum, but in another forum, about another hashing algorithm besides SHA-256, and there are other competing algorithms. Get this. There are some other hashing algorithms that are slower and are less efficient in hashing and verifying a hash than SHA-256, and some people actually say that's a form of security. Because if the hackers are trying to run a rainbow table with a particular hashing algorithm, it's going to add latency for them. We always think that quicker is better, but you know what? An algorithm which produces hashes slower and reverses them, or not really reverses them, of course, but finds plain text that might collide with known hashes, in some cases, that could be a form of security. So what I'm saying to you guys is, in response to the question that Chris was just mentioning, forget about optimizing your system. I have students that are heavy gamers, and they're walking around with systems that will make your eyeballs pop out. They've got cooling systems that go out into the cold Rochester winter and come back with water to keep their systems that are souped up to the nth degree as cool as possible. My point is, from a security, from a cybersecurity, from a pen testing perspective, you're walking around with your laptop. You're not walking around with hardcore systems a lot of the time. You're going to be pen testing on systems that are already in existence. So why not try to emulate what you're actually going to be using, as opposed to getting some false sense of efficiency? Chris was the person who asked that, satisfied with that response.
Wilson has not got back to us
Okay, Wilson,
yet,
you got back to us. Okay, let's see what else I've got right over here. This is a biggie one from Canon. Is Canon with us tonight?
I believe so.
I think I saw Canon in the chat room. Canon, are you with us tonight? She writes, he or she writes, I apologize, I'm not knowing the gender, but Canon writes, hello, professor. English is not my mother tongue, so forgive me for my writings. As a starter, I have two kinds of questions. One, I often find myself worried about the possibility to make some disaster with some wrong or mistakenly digitized command or action. So I'd like to know, what are the responsibilities and consequences if such a case arises? I'll take these one at a time, since this is a multi-part question. Well, Canon, there are some companies like e-commerce sites, like financial sites, like infrastructure sites that can't survive seconds of downtime per year. Has anybody heard of the 5 nines, which is 99.999% guaranteed uptime with an SLA, a service level agreement from your provider? when you go from 5 nines to 4 nines, the potential amount of downtime per year increases. So if you execute a wrong command and you actually do some form of denial of service, or you allow a data breach or data infiltration or attackers to penetrate your network, just to be quite honest, it can make a network go bankrupt. It could expose trade secrets. It could expose company secrets. It could expose personally identifiable information, PII. The ramifications are so very severe, and that actually ties into what we talked about earlier tonight, or today, or this morning, or this afternoon. We said, if you don't know the fundamentals, you are more apt to execute without knowing what the ramifications are. And that makes you more apt. That makes you more vulnerable in this situation. And of course, you know what follows. People can lose their jobs. People can lose their money. In fact, from the Ashley Madison data breach, which I hope nobody here was affected by, people actually committed suicide. I'm talking about a loss of life right now in all seriousness from that data breach because word got out that they were cheating with others, although most of the females have been identified as bots from Ashley Madison. But the fact that a user, that a person was associated with that site and the site didn't do their due diligence with cybersecurity, well, you know what? People have killed themselves over that. So that's part one of my answer to Canon. Canon says, part two. In cybersecurity, is there a mentorship or a supervised training period? In other words, I believe Canon is asking, if I get out there, is somebody there to hold my hand and make sure that I'm doing the right thing and I'm in the right path? This again ties into what I was just saying. If you're in a position where you're controlling access, where you're controlling authorization, where you're controlling the firewall permissions that allow somebody in or somebody out, or don't let somebody in or don't let somebody out, you better bet that the company is going to do their due diligence and at least hold your hand initially and do some great mentorship early on. In fact, it's what residency is all about. We've got a lot of hospitals in the area here in Rochester, in the greater Rochester area, and residents, when they start their medical career, they are working side by side, either directly or even indirectly, with somebody who's been in the medical field for a very long time for really the same reason. If you are untrained, if you are unskilled, if you are not mature, and everybody's in this situation at some point in their lives, it's a whole chicken and egg problem. Well, how do you get a job if you don't have experience? In the medical field, we're talking life and death here. In the cybersecurity field, it's really the same thing. Life and death for a company, or as in the Ashley Madison data breach, life and death for individuals as well.
So before you go on,
Sure.
Rowan asked a similar question earlier, saying, is it required? Do you know if employers are looking for a certain number of years, or is the demand that that they have too large, and are internships necessary?
Phenomenally great question. Who asked that?
Rowan.
Rowan, thank you very much. Where are you coming from tonight, Rowan? Chris, just interrupt me. I'm just curious where everybody's coming from tonight. So the first part of that question, just refresh my memory again.
Do you know if employers are looking for a certain amount of years?
So right now, at this very synchronous moment in time, there are 1 million unfilled positions. There are hackers that have been in jail that are being hired to guard a company's infrastructure. So you are very much eligible for the same positions. What's part two?
Are internships necessary?
Not necessary. A company, in fact, that's again, that Cisco Meraki recruiter, he told me, show me somebody with the fundamentals. They might not have all of the knowledge. They might not have all the technical skills. They might not have all the hands-on capabilities. I will work with them if they have a passion, if they have a desire, but most importantly, if they have the fundamentals. Next part.
That is the two questions, basically.
Rowan, is that good?
And he's from Ireland, by the way.
Great. What time is it in Ireland right now? Part 3 of this multi-part but really well selected question over here is, what do I do? What would you advise to obtain or start a job in this field, whether you're in the United States or another country? We've got 200 countries represented in this course. And I think we're probably going to close with this tonight. What would I recommend? Set up a lab environment in your home. Some people like simulation, some people like GNS3, some people like Packet Tracer. I tell my students all the time, there's nothing like the real thing. Seeing the real routers, touching the real routers, seeing the real switches, playing around with the straight-through cables, playing around with the crossover cables, playing around with the rollover cables, because in your mind you form such under the hood, under the cable, under the device knowledge that you just don't get with a simulation that exists on a screen in your laptop. Invest in the devices that we're going to be talking about as early as next week in the videos. Look for those videos next week. Remember, the modules open up every Tuesday at 14:00 UTC time. So I look forward to seeing you for those modules then. Set up your own lab. In my man cave in our basement at home, I've got a whole bunch of different devices. Get yourself a lot of virtual machines. Have a bunch of operating systems that you could run within your laptop, within your desktop. Play around with as many different topologies, which means network setups, as many different protocols, as many different operating systems as possible, as many different infrastructures as possible. And here's the kicker now. Offer your services for free. Yeah, you heard me right. Because when you help out a company, whether it's a nonprofit or even a for-profit organization, you're helping them out. You're setting up their networks, you're securing their networks, you're setting up their cybersecurity. But you know what? That company, that nonprofit, they're helping you out more than you're helping them out. They're helping you out because they're giving you something phenomenal to put on your resume. They're giving you the ability to take everything you learned and apply it hopefully in your home man or woman cave, and you're using this in a real world scenario, and that's something phenomenal that will go on the resume. When I first started out, I was offering my services for free, and you're going to get to the point where you're going to be inundated with companies and people who ask you to help secure their infrastructures and their systems and devices that, you know what, you're going to be paid rather handsomely. And again, it's not about the money. For me, it's never been about the money. For me, it's about the passion, the desire, the love I have for cybersecurity, the love I have for teaching people like Chris here at RIT, the love I have in this online class for all you 50,000 students out there in over 200 countries. If you don't have a passion, if you don't want to constantly reinvent yourself, you're in the wrong course. You're in the wrong profession. It would have been easier to be a professor of something else, something more static, something that doesn't change. But you know what? If I have a cybersecurity textbook, if it's more than a year and a half old, I'm not going to use it. It's vastly outdated. When they go to print, cybersecurity books are outdated, which is why these LinkedIn articles, the videos I've recorded for you guys, those are the most up-to-date state representations of the field of cybersecurity. So as time is winding down, let me take a peek in the chat room right over here. Had a nice crowd. We got a bunch of likes on this video as well. If you're watching this asynchronously and you have some questions as well that you'd like me to answer, send them. Put them right in the forum. I will get to every single question. If you post it in the forum and I didn't get to your question tonight, I will get to the question. Those of you that send in emails to the course email know that sometimes they forward them over to me when my intervention is needed, and I respond to them as well. I see Ranjith just picking a random message. What about router simulators? They're fine, Ranjith, but get the real thing. There's nothing that shows greater experience than dealing with the real devices, so you know what they look like when you actually have to configure them in the real world. Doug is going to get a nap before work now. Doug, are you in the United States? And I'm saying that facetiously because I'm pretty sure this Doug Brown is a student of mine as well. He's working the overnight shift here on the Eastern Coast as well. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us tonight. This has been a blast. Chris, is this amazing?
Yes, it is.
Camera crew, is this amazing?
Good.
Absolutely. Have a great night, morning, afternoon. I'll see you in CyberSec 501.